Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University, with undergraduate and graduate programs part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. The motorcycle gang Hells Angels holds a special place in American legend and lore. It's been associated with crime and violence. Cops rarely want to hear that the Hells Angels are coming to town. Well, one of its more prominent and now former leaders is here. George Christie is in town to appear in a one-man play about his life, a life that included decades as leader of the Ventura, California Hells Angels. Since his departure in 2011, he's been involved in a variety of occupations. The play, by the way, is titled Outlaw, and it opens tonight at the Westport Playhouse for a two-night run. George Christie joins me in studio. Great to have you with us, George.
Well, thanks for having me.
The Hells Angels get a bad rap?
Well, you know, Molly Marvin and I were arguing with a police chief back in the 70s. And, I told the police chief, I said, this is unnecessary. You're wasting a lot of money here. We were surrounded. And the chief said, well, you have a terrible reputation. And Moldy Marvin said, well, we do, and we worked hard for it. So, I guess it depends who you talk to at what particular point in time you're referring to. There's been ups and downs. In 1979, we were indicted by the federal government up in San Francisco for racketeering. The first time they used the racketeering, influence, corrupt organization charge against us. They traditionally used it for, traditional crime families. And there was a young prosecutor that really was going after us, and that was Robert Mueller.
I read that's one of your first experiences with this sort of world, wasn't it?
It was, and it really opened my eyes up. I developed a relationship with somewhat of a famous civil rights and criminal attorney, Tony Serra, who represented the Black Panthers up there, and he represented the Indians on Alcatraz Island. I had a relationship with him, William Kunstler. So I've met some genius legal minds over the years.
When you say you had a relationship with him, what do you mean?
Well, he represented me. That's how you develop that type of
On what kind of charges, if I may ask?
Tony Serra represented me on a 59-count state racketeering charge that I spent a year in solitary confinement fighting this case, and the local district attorney was so alarmed that Tony Serra came on board that he started chipping away at the foundation of the case, and it collapsed under its own weight. And they offered me to plead guilty to a tax charge, and which I did at Tony's suggestion.
So what kind of activities were you involved in, and was it part of the Hells Angels operation at the time?
Well, me personally, I had a bike building business. I had a tattoo shop. I had a bail bonds company. I had a concert promotion business that Bill Graham and Jerry Garcia helped me establish. But I think the thing that really got under the skin of the district attorney's office is my daughter was the youngest person to ever pass the bar in California. She was 22 years old, and she established a criminal law office, and she appointed me as the administrator. And that griped people. So they never caught me doing anything illegal, but there was a lot of inferences, allegations from informants and whatnot. And my son, who was a member of the club, had conspired with another gentleman. They stole 750,000 Vicodin off of Air Force Base. So, there was some crime there.
I'm sure your daughter loves her dad, but what does she feel about Dad's involvement with all of this?
Well, I think that she's pretty happy that I walked away from it. She probably holds a record for representing more Hells Angels than any other attorney in, the United States.
You referred to the organization as a club, and everyone else calls it a gang.
Well, it's interesting because we call it a club. Other outlaw bike clubs call themselves clubs. If you talk to the local authorities, they target us as a street gang because it falls into their jurisdiction and it suits their needs for funding and whatnot. If you talk to someone in the federal government, whoever it may be, as long as they're a federal agency, they refer to us as an enterprise or a criminal organization. We've been accused of being one of the larger criminal empires in the world. We're in every continent. We even took the name from the slogan from the British Empire: "The sun never sets on the Hells Angels." I do a lot of lectures now. I do them for defense attorneys, colleges, Monterey Naval Academy. I'm getting ready to go back there my second time, and I do stuff for Homeland Security, law enforcement, with the caveat that they can't censor me. I go there and I say whatever's on my mind. And, of course, I open it up and I get in some heated discussions with people that were formerly chasing me. And I tell them when they call us a criminal organization, I shouldn't say us because I'm no longer part of that world, but we're an organization that isn't a criminal organization, but we are an organization full of criminals. And I concede to that.
When you talk to these various groups, and what are you talking about? Are you explaining your life or your life story, or are you giving them advice on how to deal with the bad guys?
What I give them advice on is I do explain my life story because they're fascinated by it. But the biggest thing Homeland Security is interested in now is information sharing. And when I was in the club, I had a heated discussion with somebody in a meeting that I found out later was tape recorded. They were doing business with a terrorist group, and I was really against it. And I felt that should have been a rule, automatic kick out of the club. Anybody get caught interacting with anybody that narco-terrorists, whatever they may be. And the Homeland Security people came to me after I left the club, and they said, look, we're thinking out of the box. We need to figure out a way to fight this terrorism. What's your spin on it? What do you think? And so I talk about things like that. I don't give information that would get somebody prosecuted. The things I talk about are mostly adjudicated. They're in the past, but it's how they failed as in their investigation techniques and whatnot, and they apply them to people coming into the country, terrorist suspects and whatnot.
You say that you wouldn't give any information that might get someone prosecuted. I think that would be quite dangerous for you if you did that.
It would be very dangerous for me. And, one of the other leaders in the club sent a message to me that, you're getting too close to the police. And, I've always interacted with law enforcement. And as a leader, I had a vision, and my vision was to change the direction of the club, to interact with the other outlaw bike clubs, stop all the violence. And, I had a pretty good run, but in the end, it failed. It unraveled. I had a lot of moratorium on the wars between the bike clubs. But in the end, it kind of failed.
I would imagine it's a lot easier to get into an organization like that than to get out of it. Why and how did you get in and how did you get out?
Well, as a young boy, I was standing on the street corner with my father. And he was talking to a gentleman, an Italian guy. And you could hear this roar up the street. And I turned, and you could see this guy coming on this chopped Harley, and he had the Levi vest with the sleeves cut off. I don't remember what his patch said. He had something on it, but I couldn't make it out. And that just stuck in my mind. And the guy talking to my father became so upset. And I thought, gee, this is a pretty powerful position this guy's in, and he's not even paying attention to anybody. He was minding his own business, and after he left, the man talking to my father looked at me, and he spit on the ground, and he told me, that's your America. And I thought, well, I'll take it.
All right. And this was in the early 70s?
50s.
In the 50s?
That was in the 50s. I was a young boy. I was about 10.
The leadership is when you became head of the Ventura.
Right. And, actually, I became head of the Los Angeles Hells Angels. In 1966, I came back from the Marines, bought a motorcycle. The Marine commandant of the unit I was in was not real happy, and he kind of let me know if the Marine Corps wanted me to have a motorcycle, they would have issued it to me. And I drifted off, and I wound up working for the Department of Defense.
I saw that.
Yeah, but I started hanging out with a bike club called the Question Marks. They were a 1% bike club endorsed by the Hells Angels, and several of these guys became Hells Angels ultimately. And they introduced me to a bike club called the Saint and Slaves, who later became Hells Angels. The Saint and Slaves took me up to Kern River, and I was up there, kind of a fledgling guy and an independent. And the Hells Angels showed up there. That's why I went up there. I heard the Hells Angels were coming. And the leader of the Los Angeles Hells Angels, Old Man John, took me under his wing. And, he was really hands-on with me. And I wound up becoming the vice president of the Los Angeles Hells Angels after a short, tenure in the club. And then later he turned the club over to me.
So what does that involve, leadership of an organization like this?
Well, it's not what everybody would think. One of the things I did, and you'll find this interesting, is I was on the trademark board. We protected our intellectual property, Hells Angels and the logo. Our attorneys were out of San Francisco. They were Limbach, and Sutton, who also had represented Levi Strauss, Coca-Cola, MasterCard. And ultimately the attorney's office was told by these other organizations they didn't want their brand brushing up against ours. But before we departed them, they taught me a lot. They taught me about branding, they taught me about image, and they taught me how to use the media. And that's one of the things I became an expert at. I was on 60 Minutes with Mike Wallace. I did all the media. I was a liaison to all the media, and I became a liaison to the police as well and to other bike clubs because of that position.
And using the media in what way? Basically to explain the organization, try to defend it?
Well, defend it. And this is what we did. In the past, we never responded. If a police officer made an allegation or a police agency, we just let it go and we kind of laughed it off. And I equated those people listening to these terrible stories as potential jurors after the RICO trial. So I told the club, I said, look, we got to get in front of this stuff. And I said, when the police make an allegation, if it's completely wrong, we've got to get on the air with somebody, and we've got to defend ourselves. And I wound up in that position because I thought of it.
About 35 years, almost 4 decades.
4 decades, yeah.
Doing this. Okay, so the decision to get out. I mean, I imagine once you're in an organization like that, you're pretty much obligated to stay in forever.
Well, you are. And, it's interesting. There's a judge on the appellate court in Ventura. The California appellate court is located in Ventura, California. And I've known this judge because of my members, being sentenced by him over the years. And I developed a relationship with him. I was always respectful in his courtroom, and we were cordial to each other. And I ran into him shortly after I left the club, and he looked at me and he said, George, he goes, how do you quit the Hells Angels? And I said, Judge, you do it very carefully. Yeah. And that's what you do. I've been very cautious. I'm not in fear of my life, but I'm very careful. And as they say in the Marine Corps, I watch my six. I don't lose any sleep at night, but it's something I think about.
Well, do you just announce, guys, I'm leaving, or you just not show up for the next meeting?
Well, I walked into the meeting, and I didn't announce it. My son, who was now a member, he'd been a member for almost 10 years. I walked up to him, and I said, son, I got something to tell you. And he said, what's that, Dad? And I said, I'm quitting tonight. And he was shocked because nobody ever saw it coming, because I was completely dedicated up until the last day that I was a member. I walked into the meeting and I explained, I said, look, we're fighting wars on 5 fronts now. We were fighting every major bike club in the world at the time. And I said, we're running out of people to fight. And I said, historically, when you run out of people to fight, you turn inward. And I said, I don't want to be here for that. And I took my patch off, folded it up, and said, does anybody have anything to say? And the walk to the door to cross that threshold out into the street was the longest walk I ever took. And nobody said anything, but later, 2 weeks later, they had a trial without me. And I told them, I made it very clear to them, I said, well, at least the government gives you the opportunity to come into the courtroom and face the charges. But they changed my status, banned anybody in the club from talking or interacting with me.
Including your son?
My son, because of what they were doing, my son walked away.
So he's out of it now, too.
Well, my son passed away as well.
Well, sorry about that.
Well, yeah, he got pneumonia and didn't realize it and went to sleep. And
what were these fights with the other bike clubs all about?
Well, we had two major wars going that were continuous. We had a war with the Outlaws out of Chicago and Florida, and we had a war with a group of guys called the Mongols out of the West. And we were at war with them for one of the oldest reasons in the world, a woman. Both
a
of these,
woman?
Well, each two separate women, but they were. That's how the fight started, and then of course it escalated. Law enforcement misinforms the public, and they're misinformed themselves. None of these fights are over drug territory. These fights are over egos and people that have planted their flag and are very territorial. It's almost tribal-like. This is our area. Stay out of it. Don't infringe on it. And if they do, it usually winds up being a problem.
How are these fights fought?
Well, the first fight I was at was in 1977. It was kind of a hand-to-hand combat. Within months, it escalated to machine guns and dynamite. They even, some of the guys in my club went so far as blowing up a car at a funeral of the other rival bike club. And I actually got a phone call from Sam Sarantino, the underboss of the L.A. mob. And all he said to me was, "Really, George, at a funeral?" And I think he was sending a message because we were interfering in their cash flow. They couldn't do business.
So when you fought, did you arrange to meet someplace?
No.
Or just
serendipitous
you run into each other
just
somewhere?
Ran into each other.
Individuals or as a group?
Both, yeah. I mean, now, this started in 1977, and, we're now in 2018. In Riverside last year, Hell's Angel was killed by the Mongols at a gas station. And 2 months prior to that, two Mongols were killed on the Interstate 15 coming back from Las Vegas. So the war continues to rage.
You, in the material I have about you, you portray yourself as a peacekeeper during your time in Ventura. How so?
Well, I went to prison in 1986, 87. I got found not guilty. And when I got to the prison, the first thing I asked a senior member there was, "Who do we have a problem with in here?" And he laughed and he goes, "We don't fight in prison." And I said, "What do you mean we don't fight?" I said, "There are Mongols in there, outlaws, banditos?" And he said, "Yeah, they're all in here, but we don't fight." And I contemplated and I thought about it. I meditated on it for a year. That's how long I was down there fighting that case. And when I came home, I had this vision of getting all the clubs together, at least a begrudging peace, if you will. And I got a moratorium with all the clubs at one time for no violence.
And how is that negotiated?
Well, I went and talked to the Outlaws. I showed up unannounced. I found out where their leader was. He was there with a group of people. I showed up. They were completely shocked, and they, because we were killing each other. And they said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I want to talk to Taco." That was Harry Bowman was their leader. And they said, "Wait here." And they kind of surrounded me. Harry Taco Bowman came out. He always wore a black bandana, so I knew it was him. I'd heard about his black bandana. I'd never seen him before. And he had a smile on his face. So when I saw the smile on his face, I thought, well, that's a good sign. And he goes, "What are you doing here?" He goes, "You're crazy." And I said, "I came here to talk to you." And he goes, "About what?" And I said, "We need to put this war behind us." We started negotiating, and, we had a moratorium for 2 years till he put a murder contract on me.
Wow. That's tough to live with.
What a way to end a moratorium. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk a little bit now about Outlaw. The Outlaws, is it the name
it's
of
Outlaw.
it? Outlaw, the production.
My Life and Beyond, in the Hells Angels and Beyond.
It's a one-man show. How do you portray your life in a one-man show?
Well, I'll tell you, if anybody saw my television show, Outlaw Chronicles, I took my television show. For my television show, I learned a lot about myself on the air doing this show on the History Channel. I wrote a book called Exile on Front Street because the club had exiled me. And from there, I decided I wrote a couple other books, but I thought I'm going to take the Outlaw Chronicles, I'm going to take my book Exile, and I'm going to turn it into a stage play. But I'm going to try to figure out and convey to the audience what motivated me to choose the paths and make the decisions I did. And that's what the play's all about.
And are you just on stage
by myself
talking,
for 2 hours? There's lights, there's music. It's not a lecture. I act it out. It's similar to the television show.
You did not write it.
No. Yeah. Richard LaPlante took my book and created a stage drama, stage play, if you will, out of it.
He also wrote some music for this, and we have that. I'd like to play a little clip of it because it's quite different. Let's listen to that and come back to it and talk more about the play.
Hey, Outlaw, where you going? Oh. You're looking for that old man, John? Well, he's gone. He took one last pull on that big cigar of his, and he cranked his throttle and took off down the road. Was headed to forever, and you know that road to forever goes on and on.
The kid.
Well, that's a little different. That's quite a sound. And that's,
it is.
That is LaPlante. Is that his name?
Yeah, Richard LaPlante, personal friend of mine.
He wrote it, and that is him performing.
He was fiddling around on the guitar, and my manager, Charles, said, "Can you do a little more?" And Richard's a bigger ham than me. Mm-hmm. And he started playing, and then he came up with these lyrics. He talks about Old Man John. Old Man John was my mentor. He was the leader of the Los Angeles Hells Angels, and I go in depth about how I met him and my impression of him and what he did for me.
How do you explain? You've already talked about this here, but how do you explain on stage your decision to quit?
Well, it's very profound. I go to prison in 2001, 2002. I spent a year in solitary confinement, and my mother's dying this whole time, and it's terrible in solitary confinement. Oldest form of torture, sensory deprivation, and I really get in depth about it. And the Red Cross came to tell me my mom was ready to pass, and I was really angry. And the priest said, "I'm going to pray for you. Will you pray with me?" And I said, "No, I won't pray with you, but you can pray." Mm-hmm. And it kind of builds from that moment. I said I wanted to get my religion on the street, and I wanted my eyes open and my epiphany on the street when I had my power, my money, and everything that went along with it. And when I came back from that stay in prison, my mom passed, the Twin Towers had fallen, and I even say it, and maybe the Brotherhood and the club had fallen. The club had. I looked at the club differently when I came back, and it took me another 10 years to leave. But it was.
You had said a while back that one of the things that bothered you was that the bikers weren't building their own bikes anymore.
Well, I had lunch with Willie Davidson one time, and him and I were joking, and I said, Willie, in the old days, I go, you guys used to cringe when we came in the Harley shop, so they didn't want anything to do with us. We were the 1% that had been labeled the people that ruined it for the wholesome riders. And that was the image Harley was trying to portray. And I said, now you sell the bikes like we build. You sell the leather jackets with the sleeves cut off. You sell the chaps. And I go, you're selling an outlaw image. And I said, you owe us money. I was joking with him. Mm-hmm. And he laughed. He said, okay, I'm going to buy you lunch. And he goes, we're even now. But in the old days, you had to build your own bike. And everybody that rode built their own bike. Everybody knew each other. Everybody had a moniker. And it slowly evolved out of that live and let live society where people were getting in the club, they were going to the Harley shops, buying the bikes, felt entitled, had something coming.
So the Harley was the bike of choice for the Hells Angels?
It was the only bike you could ride. It was a rule. You had to ride an American-made motorcycle.
Well, I'm sure you're paying attention to the news these days. Harley is in the news big time with a conflict with the president.
You know, they actually quoted my blog from a year ago. I wrote a blog about President Trump that I felt, I guess I don't know if we should get political or not, but I'm not a big Trump supporter. I never was. And I asked all the bikers for Trump. I wrote a blog, and I said, you people better be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. And apparently it came to fruition.
Well, they've had quite an exchange.
They have.
The president of Harley called him a moron the other day.
Well, I think I said that a year ago.
So where do you go from here, George?
Well, I'm going back home. We're doing a 6-week run in Los Angeles, and we're refining everything. This has been the first tour we were on. Just came from Vegas, where we were told we were one of the top choices of entertainment for last weekend. We had a great run there, received very well. Did your NPR station there as well, and I just want to continue. I'm hoping that we can get to New York and just keep making the play better and better.
As you look at your former organization. Has it changed in other ways? You mentioned that there are some differences today, but are they a different organization today than they were 25 years ago?
I'd have to say absolutely yes.
Are they a better organization? Are they, more mindful, I think, of less vicious and criminal ways?
I don't know. I think I'll reserve my comment. I think that I'm no longer a member of the Hells Angels. I don't think it's appropriate for me to talk about their position or where they're coming from. I've stated publicly in my television show and in my book and in the stage play what I think. But I think if they want to respond to the things that I put in the media, I think it's up to them to do it. And it's not up to me to be an advocate one way or another.
It's been quite a life, obviously. If you had it all to do over again, would you go the same route?
I absolutely would.
You would?
Yeah, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, I guess.
Even knowing what you know now.
Well, I've got to tell you, when I walked into that culture, there's nothing like riding one of those motorcycles that you hand built. I always saw motorcycles as a work of art, an extension of myself, and I'd like to see the outlaw bike clubs and the bike culture go back 5 decades maybe.
Yeah. Right. Well, George Christie, I want to thank you so much for being with us.
I appreciate
Fascinating
you.
Discussion. I'll remind folks that Outlaw will be performed tonight and tomorrow night at 8 o'clock at the Playhouse at Westport. Tickets still available?
They are.
All right. George Christie, thank you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Archive versions of past St. Louis On the Air programs available for download or podcast at stlpublicradio.org/STLOnAir. Programs produced by Alex Hoyer, Evie Hemphill, and Lara Hamden. Today we say goodbye to producer Lara Hamden. She's been with St. Louis Public Radio for more than a year in both the news department and with the St. Louis On the Air team. We wish her all the best as she pursues new opportunities overseas. Thank you for listening. I'm Don Marsh.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.